A very good afternoon. I am here to present a perspective on India. The pandemic was universal, while the hardships and the economic consequences one other impact. A very good afternoon. I am here to present a perspective on India. The pandemic was universal, while the hardships and the economic consequences were severe. It had one other impact, and that is what happens to content consumption during the pandemic when there were 3 to 4 phases of lockdown. The perspective here is to discuss what happened to the content consumption by many Indians during the pandemic. It can broadly be divided into news and media and entertainment. Although they form a significant aspect of academic discourse for many years, what happened to the media during the pandemic is of immediate concern. The pandemic shifted the consumption from the traditional out of the home theatrical circuit to at home, or what I would say as the dwelling unit consumption. Television, as all of you know, is the frontier medium for this consumption. However, television has many forms, including what many of us would understand as smart television with internet connectivity. Many of you might wonder as to how significant internet and smart TV is for a country like India, wherein digital divide has been a recurrent concern. The screen universe in India is almost about 290 to 300 million homes having television sets through multiple forms of distribution of content, including the more recent distribution via the internet of the OTT platforms. We cannot simplify and say that OTT is a pandemic phenomenon. No, OTT had preceded the pandemic in India thanks to the telecommunications revolution and also the entrepreneurial approach of an operator who decided that by making available cheap sets and also bundling data plan, he could transform the entertainment habits of the people. Television, no doubt, was the leading platform, and more than 900 channels offer television content to many homes in India. It might be pointed out that the major consumption of content in India is in the entertainment sector. All of you are familiar that the Indian cinema industry is one of the largest in the world and has more than 100 years of existence. It has shaped the entertainment values and genres and the consumption in India. During the lockdown, what happened was the television, no doubt, became the focal point for the family and individuals to view content. After a few serials that had managed to complete their shooting, television had to depend on reruns of old serials and epics. In fact, the government owned television channel decided that it is going to rerun the epics and therefore harvested quite a bit of revenue by doing so. A consequential phenomenon of this was the parallel, slow, and incremental rise in OTT subscriptions in India. The OTT platforms in India, almost about 20 to 25 of them are offering content, and they are characterized by probably relatively low charges of internet connectivity, as well as current levels of subscription for the OTT, which, according to many, is in the affordable bracket. Quite a few of the OTT are also in the free mode. And it is in this context that the OTT content became very significant. Platform based consumption, as some authors would say, increased significantly in India, including what some authors have pointed out as binge consumption. And one or two studies during the pandemic indicate that the binge consumption is also uh, indicative of certain psychological factors as far as the people are concerned. The Indian OTT content is, like other media, print media or television, is driven mainly by the regional languages. In fact, they are the drivers of entertainment in India. Although Hindi occupies about 45% of the content, industry is expecting that the combined subscription of language OTTs other than Hindi is going to increase drastically in the years to come. Now, the films as a source of entertainment, because the platformization has to compare with theaters. 100 million is the estimated figure of people going into cinema theaters. And it is expected that with the rise in OTT, it is likely to go up to even 250 million. Why did or did television lose out at all? The answer is yes and no. Television, through 900 channels, does occupy a significant space in the viewing habits of people. But the pandemic had affected the production to such an extent that television could not offer anything fresh. It is in this perspective that OTT was able to get into the viewing space of the people. Now, is it likely that theaters are going to shut down permanently? Some over enthusiastic scholars are, in fact, writing an obit for theaters. But the immediate aftermath after the lockdowns were lifted, there was a surge towards theatre. But slowly, industry is pointing out it has kind of averaged to about 50% of what it was during the pre-pandemic era. And what does platformization mean for the screen industries in India is a question that perhaps requires a deep rooted analysis of many other factors. However, in this presentation, what has been attempted is to try and give you a perspective as to the shift, if any, in the viewing habits and preferences, and the nature and structure of the OTT in the days to come. Indian media is already moving towards digital, and subscription based content consumption is likely to be the order of the day. From that point of view, India may not be very different from other Asian countries, but the diversity and plurality that India has does offer various perspectives on the nature, volume, and structure of the platformization that has occurred in India. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Um,
This specific call about a worldwide trend in the context of pandemic, particularly with regard to screen industries. And the panel was specifically approved at the ICA session, and I was asked to make the or provide the Indian perspective. Uh, so this is, it was scheduled this morning, and I have sent the presentation to the chairman. And I also thought it would be an occasion for me to present it to all of us here and get your responses and feedback. I would be happy. No questions? Please, please come. Come here.
It's very well needed study because in the industry today that is moving from the traditional method of screening movies towards the digitized world. As a first-hand information, because in the academy we discuss these points, many of the producers and distributors, they are they are of the opinion that probably this kind of a digitization may affect their business. That is one point. Second is when we take Indian cinema as a whole. So how do you consider that the vernacular platforms, like for example, producing movies in multiple languages, just like what we have seen Bahubali, KGF, and others. But they are making inroads into these OTT platforms. But a single language, if it is produced only in Hindi or maybe in Telugu or Tamil or Malayalam, they are not making inroads into the OTT platform. How do you react to that kind of a developments?
Yeah, in fact, in one of the slides you would have noticed, or even two slides, I had highlighted the dynamics of what we normally understand as the regional and the national, about which nowadays there are a lot of and not necessarily
It is very clear that as the industry evolves, technology box office collections, packages for n number of algorithms and the other kind that we used to talk about find expression and have broken the OTT viewership to a very high level of absorption. The second question you asked me was the audio dubbing into multiple languages with single storyline or narrative structure. On the one hand, it might be a simple, glorified use of available technology, simultaneous translation, and sound which is likely to come. So my answer to that is, although I don't want to be a technological determinist, is that technology in certain situations holds the key in responding to some of the questions you have. The plurality, diversity, which we talk about, you would notice has never affected the media and entertainment industry because they have picked up strands of a Malayalam movie or a Tamil movie or a Kannada movie or even a Bhojpuri movie. Talk about the Bhojpuri phenomenon. I think they all capitalized on the potential of pan India viewership. Geo, we might be critical, initiated a revolution of sorts in providing almost free telephone, cheap data, and do you know who benefited a lot? Not question of benefited. Who were the largest constituency? It was the migrant population that capitalized on that. And that is the success story of telecom linked content. So there are many complexities, but I think the structure of the industry is likely to settle down to small, well-made, simple content kind of consumption. You'll see it for one day, forget about it. Reruns, silver jubilees, those eras are gone. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, sir. Because the pandemic is not that severe these days in at least in India, when compared to earlier this. And there were recently some theater release also. So what is the future of OTT?
Towards the end of my presentation, I raised the question of the theoretical obituary of theaters as against the rising OTT subscriptions. Now, from about almost 13,000 plus theaters, you have come down to about 9,000, of which 6,000 are traditional and multiplexes, etc. So there was a phase in India where multiplexes brought in an era of a new sociological Gen Next viewing habit. Theaters were never large. I'm talking about the multiplex, and they brought in a whole new load of that was broken. The severity of pandemic or not, the 4 lockdowns perforce closed all the cinema theaters in India. And the media and entertainment industry economics took a nosedive. And people who waited till theaters open for their big releases, some of them were not patient enough, they released it, made good money in OTT. And some of the immediate aftermath of the post lockdown, the few movies, all movies did not make money. There might be three movies, because in industry analysis, normally what happens, one good movie is said to speak for the volumes about the entire industry. One sales, many others sink. This has been the story of entertainment industry. So severity of lockdown or not may not be a variable as much as the fact that industry came to a standstill. And when industry came to a standstill, OTTs fed some fresh content which television reruns were not able to do, nor old cinema. How many times you look at, see, at some point in time before the pandemic, one channel used to show the same movies 2 times a day in loop mode. So some of these things get the better of audience, and they do shape their preferences and viewers, and that is what happened.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. So this is, I understand, is the first 2 years of the pandemic, but for the first quarter of 2022, Netflix, for the first time ever in 10 years, reported a loss in subscription. It was about 2 lakhs. And then there were reports, I mean, that this could also mean that the OTT has kind of peaked, and it might suggest a similar trend for other platforms. So just wanted your opinion. Do you believe that OTT has peaked? And also looking at one of the slides mentioning that the subscription model is kind of overtaking the advertisement based model. But now going back to the Netflix example, the CEO who had once strictly said that there will be no ads on Netflix is now actually considering ads on Netflix. So just wanted your view on this post.
Taking the last observation first, historically, there has never been free lunch in media. All models of communication start with offering a free initializing service. Some can sustain it on the basis of the value of the content, such as, for example, current and news, current affairs and news. But when competition in the news and the current affairs industry increased, the stock content, after all, as you know, comes from a limited but probably more number of sources. When the competition for packaging of content increased, it was the package content that attracted the eyeballs. And once eyeballs come in, the news industry was never shy of saying that it's okay with advertising. Take the example of YouTube. We all got to YouTube thinking that a glorious era of liberalization, democratization has come and anybody can take. Now it's a taxing thing to watch YouTube, because right at the nick of the moment in your 3-minute observation, you will have 3 ads. And for a ad-free world, you have to subscribe to their premium. And the premium is likely to have multiple layers of super premium, higher premium, elite premium, etc. Now the Netflix, that question you asked, a deeper analysis would say, some people have analyzed, I think probably the Ukraine conflict and the repercussions in certain parts of the world had a cumulative impact of Netflix. Whether it has seeped down to India is a hypothetical assumption as of now. Now, the question of subscription based versus advertising, because what is happening is advertising is moving into a highly niche and digital unitized model, wherein large scale platforms based on eyeballs may or may not be able to generate the kind of revenue. Advertising has many other options. That is why subscription or a teaser pay per view. For example, newer movies, you have to rent it at 600 rupees, 499 rupees. For the family of five, I'm talking about families that can afford it. Any generalization I make should not be saying, what about the poor? What about the others? Are you talking about people like us? Yes, people like us, we're talking about, but that number, as far as India is concerned, runs to 500, 600 million, which is much more than smaller countries put together. So this is something that subscription models might want to capitalize on and slowly introduce advertising. But advertisers have better social media and digital spaces to reach out in a far more targeted manner than a free lunch based platform. Any other question?
So this might be in contradiction to the earlier question. The question is that OTT was there before pandemic as well. During the pandemic, a different trend of watching cinema developed, in the sense that experience of watching film or movie in a theater is different. Watching it on OTT is different. But during the pandemic of 2 years, we all came to the term that, okay, watching the movie at home on our OTT platforms can be a thing. And we started we started doing things to enjoy it, like, putting a bigger screen at home and all. Now that pandemic is still there, but the severity may be little less. Do you think that this trend that people developed during the pandemic is going to continue, or we are going to get back to the theater halls to watch the movie? That is, it also, there's also a point that I maybe do not want to risk my money. I do not know whether the movie is going to be right or not, so I would better stay at home and watch it on OTT instead of going there and ruining my experience. A lot of time the movies are parallelly being released on OTT and theater as well. So
You see, the first few slides, although the brief was to talk about OTT, unlike in the rest of the context that they were talking about, I deliberately pitched for television as a driving force of entertainment, but not looking at television just as the medium, but as a platform which in turn leads to the facilitation of OTT as well. Now, your observation as to whether the screens have become bigger, the viewing experiences have become, different and complex depending upon the affordability, etc. That is definitely not related to pandemic at all. Bigger screens, wider screens, home theaters have all preceded pandemic, and they are the run of the technology, which has nothing to do with pandemic as such. But whether the pandemic provided a unique opportunity to discover the viewing experiences at home, individually, or for the family, is something that we need to ponder. Second is, OTT platforms are like libraries. Anybody can pick them up at any given point in time. So sociologically, maybe there will be a bearing on Natasha or somebody wanting to say that I want to watch this alone. I don't want kids around. I don't want my husband around. I want to watch it and enjoy it for what I like. So the whole concept of family that we have been celebrating, as in Saas Bhi Karvi Bahu and serials, etc., may not happen. OTT might have a newer dynamics because as of now it affords a pick up a book, pick up a movie and see. But as somebody is indicating, all models in the world will become monetized. And when they become monetized, you will have to pay per unit charge of consumption. The day might come when your TV might be like your electricity meter. If it is switched on and linked to, you may be charged meter on that. So already governments are eyeing OTT and entertainment as a very high income base for taxation. So this is going to happen. Thank you. Yes, Krishnamani, you have a question? Yeah.
If you have any more questions, we request you to put it up in the chat box.
One chat.
Yeah, are there any questions? Okay. So if there are no more questions,
All right. Thank you, MIC, and thank you to my team for facilitating this. It's been a good experience. And this hub idea has made us travel to Paris back and forth every day. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you. Bye bye.
thank you very much, Professor Sanjay, for this. The session was really wonderful. I'm sure that's quite evident from the number of questions you received. It's a very interesting area. It's a very interesting topic. We really appreciate that, you took the initiative to do this for us. Thank you very much. Uh, to all of you present here, we will be back at 8:30 IST